This video is going to discuss 10 major problems that are currently inside Warzone 2 as well as DMZ that do need to be resolved before the mid-season 1 update or during that update. Now, we've got a ton of content coming within that update when it comes to raids and things like that, but before they add any new content into this game, I do think they need to solve quite a few problems that are currently plaguing the game at the moment. And starting off at number 1, the first thing for me that I find is most important, that is fixing the dev errors and crashing in the game. Now, it doesn't matter which game mode you play, you've probably experienced some kind of dev error, game crashing, or just general instability of the game itself, and that is not ideal, especially when you're only playing for a small length of time. You don't want to be restarting your game constantly or be midway through almost getting a win and in the game suddenly dev errors on you, so that's not ideal. So they need to sort that out first and foremost. After that, there's a couple of gameplay mechanics that, in my opinion, need to be sorted out in this game. The first one is being able to run and plate and also run and open doors at the same time whilst you're playing. So we want to be able to do door dashing when you're running and plating, and also being able to break windows at the same time. This will add a bit of finesse into the game. Now, I'm not saying we add in any other crazy movement mechanics. I know they're not going to do that, but at least let us run and play. I mean, that's the bare minimum that we're really asking for here, and it seems very standard, so you can actually win like a 1v2 gunfight. Otherwise, there's no way of actually getting those gunfights won unless you're just pretty much slow peeking around every single corner, which is not how I want to play this game. So let's add in running and plating. The next thing is adding in 3 armor plates at the start of a match. I don't have to run around to try and get max health in this game. It should be a given. Once you find armor plates, you can then plate up to get the maximum amount of armor possible, especially since the TTK of this game is ridiculously fast. So if they're not going to do that, they should just increase the base health by 50 and then make the overall health 300 HP. But I don't think they're going to do that, so they might as well just give you 3 armor plates to begin with. Now, I know they try to cater so much to the casual player, but this doesn't even make sense in this game. Like, they're genuinely not catering to anyone in particular. They're not catering to casuals or the people that play the game the absolute most, because we're not getting the best crazy movement mechanics, but then they're adding stupid things like weapon tuning into the game, so that doesn't make any sense. No casual gamer is actually going to understand weapon tuning, and to be perfectly honest, even the guys that do stats testing don't understand weapon tuning, so that needs to get removed out of this game in my opinion. No matter which way they decide to balance it, it's never going to work out well, and I think it's just a cop-out because they didn't balance the guns very well overall in this game. So that's the way I stand with that one. Weapon tuning should be removed. The next one is another one that's been talked about a lot, and that is the looting system. This needs to be streamlined for Warzone and Battle Royale in particular, and also when Rebirth comes as well, it needs to use a streamlined looting system. Now for DMZ, they can feel free to do the craziest stuff they want, but Warzone being a competitive game, and never mind just a competitive game, just being a game where you only have one life, if you're sitting in a backpack for like 5 minutes straight trying to collect something you want, then that is not ideal for neither the most pro gamer or the most casual gamer. You want to be able to pick up the guns and move on as quickly as possible, and pretty much everyone should be able to agree on that one. That brings me on to picking up weapons and picking up loot in general. When loot's kind of stacked on top of each other in this game, it's so buggy, it's ridiculous. You cannot even pick up the gun you want if you see it lying on the ground. And it was relatively bad inside Warzone 1 sometimes, but in this game it's absolutely ridiculous. You can never pick up a gun if you're seeing it on the ground. And that's just something that needs to be corrected pretty much straight away as well. The next thing is got to do with loadout drops, and I do believe they are going to be bringing loadouts back into the game in general, so that is perfect in my opinion. But I do think every buy station should have loadout drops, and every buy station should be consistent enough to allow you to buy every single item at that buy station. Also, the buy system kind of inventory and how you buy things should be a lot more streamlined as well. And then on top of that, there should be no limit to what you can buy at the buy station as well. So if you want to buy 10 loadouts, if you've got the cash to do that, then by all means you should be able to buy 10 loadouts. It's just very simple things that were in the previous game that are not in this game for some reason. And to be perfectly honest, these changes, even though they're trying to make the game a bit different, don't even really make any sense. The next thing for me, and I don't really play too much DMZ, but I do think they need to tune down the difficulty of the bots in DMZ. Now, I do understand they're trying to make it relatively competitive and make it a bit interesting so you can actually die and all that good stuff, but it's not a competitive game mode, first of all, and second of all, it's mainly made for the casual player to jump in, level up some guns, play something different. But on top of that, I just think that if you're dying pretty much instantly, especially if you have no guns and you've just freshly started DMZ, then it's not really going to be all that fun, in my opinion. Now, should there be bots that are a bit more difficult than others? Absolutely, I do think that is how it should work, especially if you're trying to like unlock a gun like the M13, for example, or whatever it may be, then that bot in particular should obviously be a bit more difficult. But if the average bot in this game, when it comes to AI, is actually better than the average player in this game, then that is something that is definitely a problem. Having said that though, I do think overall DMZ is the better game mode here because there's a lot of content to be had within DMZ for the most part, especially when it comes to unlockable items and kind of generally what the game mode is made for, and I do think overall they will expand on this going on into the future. But going back to Warzone 2 now, I do think the pacing of the games are very slow. This should obviously be fixed with a larger player count, but again, I don't really think they'll do that. But I do think zone timings can basically play into this as well, maybe if they collapse the zones a little bit quicker, especially in a solos match when pretty much 90% of the players are camping. From the gameplay you've probably seen in the background, I had to cut out a lot of sections where I was running about not finding anyone at all, and that is a bit boring. I do think another relatively easy fix to this would be the redeploy balloons that we had back on Caldera as well as Fortune's Keep and Rebirth Island. Those were amazing additions to the game in my opinion. I thought they were fantastic for getting about a lot faster, and not everyone likes using vehicles. Personally, I don't like using vehicles in this game unless I really have to and I'm trying to escape the zone, but for the most part I like to play on foot. Everyone has their own play style, but I do think redeploy balloons will help with that. Another really easy fix to this would just to be double the duration of the tactical sprint as well, so that you can get around the map a lot faster and be able to tactical sprint for longer. It's a mechanic that's in the game. It's not a skill gap. It's something that is pretty much standard at this point and everyone uses it. So if they just double the duration of that, and then obviously double time can just double that duration, then I think that would be overall a really solid way to make people get around the map a lot quicker as well. The pinging system definitely needs fixed. I think this is something that overall Warzone 1 did relatively well. Obviously, it did have its general bugs and sometimes it didn't work perfectly, but I definitely think it was a much better system than what we have in Warzone 2.0, and being able to see every teammate have their own color. The ping was quite large, so you knew exactly where it was in the minimap or in general in the world when you're looking at your regular screen. Obviously, that is another thing. And then also pinging items like buy stations and stuff should be very visible, especially for those people who do not use microphones. The next thing I want to touch on is something that not a lot of people actually have talked about so far, and that is visual recoil when it comes to fully automatic weapons in this game, and pretty much 90% of the optics. Now, are there a few exceptions to the visual recoil rule? Yes, and those are essentially the meta optics for this game. But pretty much every single optic in this game, if you're using an assault rifle or LMG, anything that's fully automatic essentially, then you are going to get a crap load of visual recoil on your screen. And this is something that I find really weird, making a lot of the optics useless within the game, because people tend to try and reduce the recoil as much as they possibly can, and visual recoil is a factor in that as well. So hopefully they find a way to reduce this for pretty much all the optics so that they all can be viable. Next up, we have the perk system. Now, this is absolutely broken at the moment. The perk system barely works in this game. If you get to some of the level 3 perks in the game, some of them do not even work at all. So they definitely need to get around to fixing those. Not to mention that not every single player is able to do custom perk packages. Now, this leads to an imbalance because there is a player base that is able to do it, and then majority of the player base are not able to make custom perk packages. So that is something they need to basically make a decision on, whether people can or cannot do it, and then implement that properly into the game so that everyone has a fair standing within a match. Another thing I want to touch on here, and that is the Gulag system. Now, I can appreciate that they're trying to change things up from the previous game, and that is perfectly fine. But when it comes to the Gulag, I do think it's supposed to be relatively competitive, and the reason for that is because pretty much your whole life depends on it, especially if you're playing like a solos match, for example. And then you'll find yourself in some cases, if your teammate's either AFK or just not up to scratch when it comes to the skill level required to be in that particular Gulag fight. Now, even that, I would say, is somewhat down to skill if you're able to do a 2v1 in the Gulag, and you do get a sense of achievement that you've made it back and you've beat 2 players if your teammate was not helping you whatsoever. But what I can't understand is why they thought it was a good idea to add AI into the Gulag. That makes no sense whatsoever. So not only there was a bit of randomness added with the 2v2 aspect, they pretty much added even more randomness for absolutely no apparent reason by adding AI into the game. Not only that, is like one of the most hardest AI to beat with a pistol, so it doesn't really make any sense why they did that. So I do think they should remove the AI from the Gulag. Another thing they fixed inside Warzone 1 was the melee mechanics and the fact that the base melee didn't do all that much damage near the end of Warzone's life cycle, and I thought that was a really good change to this game. The fact that meleeing can basically kill players faster than with certain weapons is absolutely stupid in my opinion. So I hope they kind of take the approach they did back in Warzone 1 and nerf the melee again. But another thing they also have to nerf, in my opinion, is being able to carry like 100 self-revives. There is no need in this game to be able to carry that many self-revives. You can already get a revive pistol as well as a field upgrade. So basically having a revive pistol along with a self-revive already accounts for 2 revives if you really need it, especially in a solos game, for example, if you find yourself going down quite a lot. And even then, you don't really find yourself going down quite a lot in this game anyway, because you can't get a one-shot headshot on a sniper, which I haven't even discussed in this video, by the way. But if you do want to hear me discuss that, I made a whole separate video on that, and I'll leave it linked at the end of this one. But 1 self-revive and 1 revive pistol should be more than enough for most players to get revived enough many times, and particularly when it comes to solo matches, of course, because inside a trios or a quads, for example, your teammates could buy you back anyways. The last point I want to make is regarding gas plays. Now, stems do not help you in gas, which in the previous game they did. We also had the deploy systems that used to basically allow you to stay in the gas a little bit longer, which they also removed, and I thought was a great field upgrade choice for people who like to play a bit slower and sit in the gas when they can. And just overall, gas masks don't really last that long in this game as well, so I do think they need to reintroduce things like that into this game to make it a bit more diverse. Now, all these changes do need to be introduced relatively soon, in my opinion, because the interest for this game is dying down quite rapidly, to be perfectly honest, if you do check it out online. But let me know what you think about all these changes and what you would personally change about this game if you had the option to, and thank you very much for watching.